Hey, what's going on? My name's Erad. Today I'm going to go over some settings in Escape from Tarkov. Even the best of the best PCs don't always run this game perfect, but with the right configuration you can get it to run pretty smooth to where it is pretty playable. Tarkov is heavily server dependent, so if their servers are going down, or if they're lagging, or if other players are lagging on the server, it can affect the outcome of your gameplay as well. First things first, everyone thinks they need a beast CPU to run the game. CPU upgrade is only going to go so far. It'll get you more performance for sure. It'll get you a lower minimum frame rate, but it's never going to max out usage, because even slower CPUs don't max out usage while trying to play this game. Tarkov is slow paced enough to where at a lower FPS without stuttering, the game is perfectly playable. It doesn't usually require extremely fast reflexes. A lot of the stuff is peeking and pre-firing. Also, the GPU is an average factor in the gameplay. Upgrading to a 3080 isn't going to net you any more frames than you got with your 970 or your 1080 or your 1070. Almost all the graphics settings that you change in the menu will increase your GPU usage, so if you have a better GPU, you can crank up the settings to get a better visual quality, but it's not going to make the game run any better or any worse than you were getting on all the low settings. I know that really doesn't make too much sense, but that's kind of just how the game runs because it's very unoptimized in its current state. Tarkov tends to only use 5 to 6 cores. The standard RAM is 16 gigs recommended. There is a check mark for, you can do the auto RAM cleaner where it says 8 gigs and you can kind of clear it out on its own. But every time that RAM goes to clear, you will get a slight stutter. Even with 16 gigs of RAM, some of these maps have some leaks to where you can go over that, especially if you have any background processes running. Anything such as Discord, Steam, Epic, Corsair, Nvidia, Razer, Firefox, Chrome, Twitch, any of those. All of them use up background resources and they can cause any type of stutter or hitch and also increase the RAM usage overall. Pretty much there's not a super amount of things you can do to get it right. You can put everything on low. You can try to resample it at a lower resolution. Pretty much re-renders it at 0.75 times or 0.50 times, but the game looks really blurry and really poor to play. And that would be like worst case scenario. You always want to kind of keep it at 1 times. If you have a beast video card, or if you want to take screenshots, you can crank it up to 2 times or 4 times. It will increase the GPU usage, but your frame rate most likely will stay the same as it was at 1080p. Something that I do, I play with an FPS cap of 85. Generally because in most maps I don't get over 90 or 100 FPS unless in certain areas, and then in the slower times or in the more gunfight battles and such like that, my FPS will drop, but it doesn't drop too low. So if I keep it at 85, it tends to keep the frame rate more consistent, which actually leads to a better overall experience. Also, when you look around and your max frame rate goes into 140 or 120, there's really no necessary need for that, especially if when you're actually in a gunfight or you're running around fighting people, your frame rate doesn't stay that consistent to begin with.
Never mind.
There's also some things to note. The longer you're in a raid, the more it'll directly affect the overall FPS. As the server gets loaded, more PMCs load in, more scavs load in, more loot gets dropped, more loot gets taken out. Everything has a little effect on your overall frame rate. So keep that in mind. As you stay in raids longer, your performance can get worse. One last thing to note before I get into how each setting affects the game and what it does is that playing in offline mode does not indicate the performance of what you're going to get while you're playing in a live raid. If you're playing in offline with no scavs, your PC will run at its best and it won't have any scavs to render, so generally you'll get a higher frame rate than if you were in a live raid. But if you're playing offline with scavs, you're kind of almost rendering like two instances of the game, because you're loading all the scavs and all the AI, and then you're also playing the game on your own, like you're the client connecting to a server. So you'll get a lower FPS. Somewhere in the middle there is kind of what you'll get in a live game. I mean, easiest way to test it is to just do some scav runs, see how your game runs. You can use loading into a offline raid with low scavs to kind of simulate what it's going to give you, because there's not too many scavs spawning, so there's not too much load on the computer, and you can kind of judge your settings by that, and the performance you get from that will kind of correlate to what you'll actually get in a live game. But other than being in an actual live game and being connected to a server, you're not going to get the exact replica of what your computer is going to perform like unless you're actually playing it. You ever try to figure out why you see somebody walking around, or they're hiding behind something and you're shooting them, but yet you're not getting the kill? You're not getting hits on them? Well, say you got this basic red dot, you see a guy walking in the warehouse trying to shoot him. Why is he not dying? Why? Like, I hit him 4 times. Well, that's why. Object level of detail directly correlates to these objects that are not being rendered from a distance. So that warehouse looks completely empty. You zoom in, it's full of crap. There's a box there. There's branches. Log. Same thing goes for the back of this truck. Hey look, there's logs in the back of this truck. But you zoom out. Nope. Nothing there. But you might see his head sticking up, and you might try to shoot him and shoot him like 4 times, be like, dude, I shot him in the head. Well, you didn't. You shot the log. So, you should be aware of these things. You can fix this. This object level of detail level of detail quality. And if you up it 3.5 maybe, you can see a log there. Now you can see more logs. See, you see the log on top, but you don't see the log on the bottom. Not that that one matters. I'm just pointing it out. Look over here. Stuff in the garage. Zoom out. It's still there. But if I back up, oh, right there. Boom. Popped out, popped in. So you'll still see enemies walking around in here. Scavs or PMCs. And you'll try to shoot them and be like, why can't I hit this guy? That's why you can't hit him, because you're shooting that box right there that he's hiding behind. It all comes with a balance. You can keep this low and be aware of these issues, or you can keep it high and give you a more realistic approach. I personally keep it right here. That's your call. Next one brings me to overall visibility. It's a very misleading setting. This maxed out. I guess these go by meters, 3,000 meters, I'd say. Lets you see into the distance, right? So I can see wires, these trees, but these tanker, like all this stuff is normally here anyway. I turned down this setting. Now, I don't see those trees are gone. Trees in the distance disappear, but the rest of this is still here. It does not improve overall visibility at all. You can see these trees on the left-hand side here. Those over there disappear and reappear as I turn. This is what this setting directly affects. Like the mountains go in and out, in which most of the stuff you wouldn't be looking for anyway. Let's see, you see all these cars in the parking lot. Some signs, there's some garbage there. You don't see that garbage. Still don't see that garbage because this setting does not affect that whatsoever. All this stuff is still not rendered. This is actually all affected by level of detail. So when you turn up the level of detail, wait, I still might not even see. Okay, you can see the garbage. Can't see the super amount of details, but you still see it. So, overall visibility, absolutely zero reason to keep this past 400, I'd say. I mean, you can keep it at 1,000 for safe, but as far as I know, this affects performance quite a bit, going from 3,000 to 400, especially in maps like Woods, where they're rendering tons and tons of trees in the distance. Trees you wouldn't be seeing anyway, or even be looking through, so you might as well keep it down, and this definitely gives you a good 10 to 15 frames per second more at a lower setting. Level of detail can also affect quite a bit. I don't care if I see that pile of garbage or not. You can keep it at 2.5 or 3. That garbage is gone, but still see all this stuff. There's a lot of things that are gone. See, this looks very plain and bland. There's no details here. It's because they're all gone because of that level of detail. Labeling this as overall visibility, you'll never see the difference. It doesn't actually increase or decrease in visibility besides for far rendered backgrounds. So like these trees and anything in the horizon, that's all the visibility is talking about. Next up is one of the things I think in Tarkov is the dumbest glitch or flaw in the engine possible. See, right now I'm outside, sunny day, interchange. I'm looking into the garage and this is bright as hell. I could see enemies run across here no problem. And like all the shadows are all messed up. Well, this is directly related to the two settings: shadows quality and shadow visibility. Shadow quality pretty much gives you better quality shadows, like real-time shadows that the sun makes, I guess, as it's moving around the world. This, by putting ultra, extends how far your visibility goes. So if it's at low, you have 75 to 40 visibility. You put it at ultra, you turn it up, all that is gone. Now you can see in here, but farther down the line, the shadows go all the way down to as far as you can see pretty much. This has a minimal impact on actual performance. If you like it this way, keep it this way. If you don't, you can set it to this ugly setting with low visibility. And you get this. I mean, and you could just, as you walk, it goes away. Only when you're in here, though. As soon as you come back out, like, that should be fixed. This shouldn't be a thing in the game, but just to point it out, that's a part of what shadows and the visibility does for places like Interchange. Second part of the shadows in this game that I think is stupid. The shadows are client side. So what I see on my screen, I see that shadow there. I can easily turn it off by just going to a lower setting. Boom, shadow's gone. It doesn't make any sense. So you could be closer to it, see close vegetation, trees, bushes, all have shadows. And you can see like that tree has no shadow. As I get closer to it, it develops a shadow. Okay, that's cool. Now let's say I'm a PMC hiding out here and I'm all in black or all in dark green or whatever, and I think I'm like hidden in the shadows and I'm standing out here. I pretty much look like a sitting duck over here because none of these shadows are here if the player that's going to shoot me has these settings turned down. So I think that's something that should be fixed across the board, but until they do so, that is what this setting does and how it affects the gameplay. See, it looks so much better with it. This looks great. Like, it might be harder to spot a player hiding in there. Say he was laying prone, you know, trying to hide from people that are chasing him, or trying to hide, like, in a rainy day or a cloudy day. These shadows would be very helpful, but for the fact that they only render on my PC and not everyone else's PC, it makes it completely pointless to even have the shadows to begin with. I just don't understand why that's even a thing in this game when the game's supposed to be realism and immersion. I could put on ultra and keep the good quality shadows up close, but then all my far shadows are gone. None of these trees have shadows. It just looks very bland. But if you see a PMC running on here, he's going to stand out like a sore thumb. Just makes no sense to me why they would keep the game this way, or maybe that's just imitation of the game engine. I'm not exactly sure, but that's one thing to be aware of. When you think a shadow's hiding you, it's probably not. So staying in the shadows does not help unless it's dark out. Our next setting is HBAO, or Horizon-Based Ambient Inclusion. It makes corners darker, gives objects more shadow and detail, makes it harder for PMCs to be spotted in the dark. It's best to just be left off because it eats up a ton of performance. Next up is screen-spaced reflections. It's poorly implemented. It causes a lot of graphical errors and glitches in the distance. See, right now we don't have any on. We don't see any reflection on the water. And turn it on in the settings real quick. Put it on ultra just to give you the best contrast. So you get a little bit of reflection, but only through the scope, not so much without the scope. As you can see in the distance across the water though, the trees are kind of glitchy and like popping in and out. Can make you think that you saw something you didn't. It's just best to leave it off